Today is Wednesday, October 21. My name is Pastor Michael, and this is Wilderness Wanderings. Today our text comes from Nehemiah 2. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me, and what the king had said to me. They replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this good work. Verses 17 and 18. During a war, soldiers don't jump up from behind their protected barricades with hurt expressions and ask the other side, "Was it something I said?" That would be silly to the extreme. Likewise, the spiritual battles we Christians face are not really about us. Our enemy is raging against Christ in us. He is opposing Jesus and his church, pitching various weapons and human obstacles against us. Our task is not to take it personally and wonder if we did wrong. Our task is to suit up in spiritual armor, show up on the battlefield, and persevere for Christ. We need to know that resistance is just part of the story when we are being obedient to God. Of course, opposition always makes things more difficult. As Christians, we often need to be prepared to go the extra mile. Reaching the world with the truth and love of Christ will involve inconvenience and personal sacrifice at the best of times, but especially when others are creating obstacles. Sometimes God allows things to proceed relatively easily, as when Nehemiah makes his request to Artaxerxes. But other times it is more of a struggle. In chapter 1, everything goes smoothly. As we saw, he was anxious and did some significant, fearful praying, but God paved the way for him. When things go well, we tend to get overconfident. We might think that, since God is on our side, nothing can go wrong. All obstacles will be removed. Many Christian organizations have become so enamored with their success that they have lost their way. We make compromises because we believe that success is always necessary. But not Nehemiah. He knows there is opposition to his work. He has not become overconfident. At night, in the darkness, with only a few others, he scouts the broken walls around Jerusalem. The rubble and burned out gates were a sign that Jerusalem had been defeated. In ancient culture, this meant that Jerusalem's God had been defeated too. That was a disgrace. A rebuilt wall around the city would be a symbol that God was with them and had not, in the end, been defeated. Thus Nehemiah speaks with the Israelite priests, officials, and nobles, inviting them to join him in rebuilding the wall in order to remove this disgrace. Along with his invitation, he tells them all about how God's gracious hand had brought him to this point, and how the king had made provision for him. Then the NIV says, "So they began this good work," which is a fair translation. However, a more literal translation of this phrase would be, "And they strengthened their hands for the good." Their starting point was to encourage each other to do this good work. It's interesting that the opposite happened in Ezra 4:4. In that story, the enemies of the Jews discouraged them from rebuilding the temple. The phrase translates as "weakened their hands." Later, God changed the attitude of the king of Assyria so that he gave permission and provision for rebuilding. The effect this had on the Jewish settlers was that their hands were strengthened, or as the NIV says, they were filled with joy. That's from Ezra 6:22. Throughout Ezra and Nehemiah, when Israel overcomes opposition to restoration, it is because of the things that God has done. But we see the people encouraging each other as well. None of them can go it alone. The same is still true today. We can expect to face opposition. Satan does not want Christians nor the church as a whole to succeed. One of his great strategies today is causing us to think that we are alone, that we can go it alone. But God calls us to encourage one another. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing, Paul writes, 1 Thessalonians 5:11. Take some time today to ask God whom you can encourage, whose hands you can strengthen. so they can continue in the good fight. As you journey on, go with the blessing of God. May the peace of the Lord Christ go with you wherever he may send you. May he guide you through the wilderness, protect you through the storm. May your day end with rejoicing at the wonders he has shown you. May you rest in his provision as he brings night, and then new dawn.